Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'd like to specifically thank our sponsors, United Way, SDG&E, the City of San Diego, and the San Diego Workforce Partnership. We've invited several of our sponsors and the millennials that work with our sponsors and at our sponsors to join us today to give a little bit of context to the report that we're putting out today. Before I introduce a few of them, I'd like to share some of the results of our research, including recommendations for employers and the survey results from our survey of nearly 400 working millennials here in San Diego County. I don't have too many slides. Most of today you'll be able to hear directly from some millennials in the workforce. Now, the context here is that millennials are the largest generation in our workforce. Nearly 40% of our workforce are millennials, and employers recognize that their talent attraction, retention, and productivity are dependent on how much they understand and how they interact with the millennial generation. Born between 81 and 96, millennials are defined by the economy in which they entered the workforce, the Great Recession, and the recovery that was characterized by slow wage growth that followed. More so than previous generations, millennials are looking for meaning in work. And that's the work that they do every day. And 90.5% of millennials are finding that meaning in work. Our first employer recommendation is to create that purpose-driven culture. When asked what's driving their level of satisfaction with their job, we see two types of millennials. We see those that are expecting to stay at their current job and those that are looking to leave. That's the natural divide. Purpose is only identified by 15% of millennials that are planning on staying in their current job, but it's identified by 30% of those that are planning on leaving their job. 30% makes purpose a top driver in workforce satisfaction. In other words, millennials are now expecting that purpose be part of what they do every day. Millennials expect to be part of something that's providing value to the community. If they don't find meaning in work, that's when they start looking for somewhere else to work. So our recommendation to employers is to clearly understand your organization and the way it is helping the community, and make sure that employers consistently, frequently provide that communication to millennials. They need to clearly understand what that purpose is that they're working towards. That's how to help with talent attraction, retention, and productivity. Sorry, now I'm doing three things at once. Our second employer recommendation is encourage quality and frequent communication. Millennials want to talk with their managers often. For busy and or inexperienced supervisors, that can seem very demanding. But frequent and informal check-ins with managers help employees to better see how their day-to-day work is linked to their organizational goals. So it's even more important to purpose-driven employees. Supervisors need to understand that quality and frequent communication is an important part of their role. San Diego millennials whose supervisors regularly communicate the reasons for the tasks and responsibilities are 37% more likely to be engaged at work. The millennials whose supervisors often communicate the reason for their tasks and responsibilities are over 60% more satisfied with their jobs than millennials whose supervisors never communicate. Our third employer recommendation is to recognize the importance and changing understanding of work-life balance to be more of a work-life integration. Millennials, more than other generations, have embraced the no-bounds nature of the new workplace and find balance through integration. While it wasn't even a question that we would have posed decades ago, only 71% of San Diego millennials think it's reasonable to be expected to log 8 hours a day at work. On the other side of that coin, over half of working millennials think it is reasonable to be expected to regularly check and respond to emails, text messages, and phone calls outside of regular business hours. This shift towards integrating work and life is incredibly important for employers to understand, because work hours and schedule flexibility is cited more often than anything else as the top driving factor in workplace satisfaction, more than twice as often as pay. Our last employer recommendation is to support with coaching and professional development. Now, millennials are confident as a group, which is a good thing. And it makes sense having grown up with participation trophies and being told they're capable of achieving everything. And I can say that because I fall into that definition of millennials. They're confident and willing to take on responsibilities. With the right support system, that confidence will lead to great things. And they want that support. The stereotype of millennials is that office perks like stocked snack cabinets and kombucha on tap are important to them. But they actually value a supportive culture much more. Under 6% of millennials cite perks as a top driver of satisfaction compared to 22% who cite professional development opportunities. Millennials that feel supported are nearly 30% more likely to be engaged than those that are not supported. So our recommendation to employers is to ensure employees are supported with supervisors that understand the importance of coaching and are trained as coaches and professional development opportunities. We also included one public policy recommendation, and that's to incentivize more housing. This data was so clear it was hard to ignore. The cost of housing is the major driver of affordability, and 44% of San Diego millennials are considering leaving San Diego County in the next 2 years. Of those that were very likely to leave, the most cited reason was lack of affordable housing option. Over 2/3 identified affordable housing options as one of the top drivers, top reasons that they were considering a move. So our recommendation to public policy leaders is to find a way to incentivize more housing. With that, I'd like to make the point that each of these recommendations, while we wrote them specifically about millennials, really apply to all generations. Being a good employer of a millennial workforce is being a good employer. So at this time, I'd like to once again thank our sponsors and invite up three of which are going to come up and share with us a little bit about what their day-to-day looks like, what their purpose in work is. So I'd like to first invite up Jamal Russell Black, who's a research analyst with the San Diego Workforce Partnership.
So thank you, Sean, for the introduction. As he said, my name is Jamal Russell Black. I'm with the San Diego Workforce Partnership, and I'm glad to be here with you speaking today. And yeah, for me, work is not just simply about making a living so I could pursue the traditional American dream. By that I mean the white picket fence, the home in the suburbs, the 401k. Though undoubtedly important, they do not necessarily define my career and my career trajectory. Generally speaking, I want to contribute to the betterment of society. When presented with new professional opportunities, I ask myself whether this is something that can have a positive impact on people's lives. What's more, I think I'm not alone in striving for more meaning and more meaning for my life and from my career. I regularly see a lot of my fellow millennials making the same calculation in regard to their own career and their own lives. Whether working on climate change or gender equity, immigration, or many other topics, as consumers and as a workforce, generally, I think that we're shaping the future in very profound ways. Thank you.
And last, we have Sneha Parmar, who's the manager of substation engineering and design at SDG&E.
Thank you so much for the introduction. As mentioned, I'm Sneha Parmar, and I've been with SDG&E for 12 years. And currently, I'm the manager of substation engineering and design, which means my team of about 30 people builds out the infrastructure needed to meet the community's reliability and capacity needs. So when it comes to my day-to-day work, I know that when someone gets up in the morning and they get into their electric vehicle and go to work, or they turn on their computer for the morning, or they open up their fridge and want to get dinner out, I know that I have a part of all of that. And to me, it is really satisfying and fulfilling to know that I make a difference in everyone's lives. And so it has been very meaningful for me to be in this position and have this opportunity. and I'm glad to have it. Thank you.
Great. With that, I'd like to open it up for questions if there are any in front of everyone. Otherwise, we're all happy to take some questions one-on-one. I know we have a few other millennials from our sponsors here, including from the United Way and the City of San Diego, Nicole Chaffont and Jim Woods. So we'll all be available for questions, but we can take a few questions here in front of everyone if you like.
I understand that you looked at other cities, and which cities did you look at as
Sure.
far as when you were conducting this study, and how did you focus on those particular, why did you focus on those particular cities?
Sure. So this is part of a much larger effort in which we do compare ourselves to our competitor metropolitan areas. That effort was launched back in 2016 called the Regional Job Strategy, in which we identified 10, including ourselves, competitor metropolitan areas. And those are the ones we compete with every day for jobs and talent. And that includes San Jose, San Francisco, Los Angeles here in California, but also Portland, Seattle, Raleigh, North Carolina, Denver, and Boston, and Austin, Texas. Those are the areas that we compete with most often for jobs and talent. So in this report, we did look at the percentage of millennials in the workforce and compare it to our competitor metropolitan areas, and we have the most millennials of any of them. That's the only item in which we actually compared ourselves to other areas.
What was the percentage?
39.7. It's very close to some of the others, and that is in the full report. And the lowest is about, it's several points lower. It's in the low 30s. So there is a significant range there. Yeah, Phil.
Wondering, has the chamber ever looked at other generations before and how it might compare with like a similar study, or is this your first generational study?
Yeah.
I guess because one of the things you could say is that this might be true of every generation, all these things that people want.
Right. So we would love to do 4 surveys of each of the generations. At this point, this one was just 400 statistically valid survey of 400 millennials. When we looked at the differences between our different generations in the workforce, we did leverage the work that's the body of research that's out there. So most of the report looks at best practices and what other research has determined. That's where that purpose in work was very clear in that body of research. So we looked at specifically the millennial generation and asked, what does that look like in this generation? That takeaway that you have, though, I think is accurate, and which is when you create a purpose-driven organizational culture, that's not just good for millennials, but for everyone.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by work perks? Because you said that
Sure.
not a lot of millennials put emphasis in that. Does that include like vacation days, sick days as part of the perks?
No, perks are kind of go beyond traditional benefits. So it's things like company happy hours and literally stocked snack cabinets, things like that. We tried to test those stereotypes and to see if they're myths or if they're reality. And by and large, we found them to care about things like professional development, like the generations before them, to Phil's point.
So how do you create a more purpose-driven organizational culture? If I'm a company or I'm a manager, what do I need to do to create that kind of culture?
Well, it's going to be different for every company. They have to understand what they're providing and how it benefits the community. So the media is very clear for media. It might be more difficult for another for-profit organization, but what we're seeing is that 90% are finding that meaning in work. So if you're doing something and someone's willing to pay for it, the likelihood is that there's some meaning there. You just need to understand what that is and make sure you can communicate that clearly with the front lines, the millennials and other generations in the workforce. So I think that the question is a little bit difficult because there's probably dozens of answers. For the chamber, I know it's important to us to make sure we're aligning the region to understand the best practices and the areas we should focus on when it comes to job creation. So I shouldn't assume that everyone on my team understands that. Instead, I should always bring us back to that idea that what we're doing is good for our region. And in doing that, we should be able to inspire our teams to align goals and work hard.
I guess I was alluding to perhaps other opportunities, for instance, volunteering to do community work or community service, and I think you have a representative from the United Way here to speak to that.
Please.
Nice segue, thank you. So at United Way, we work with hundreds of employers and their employees on employee engagement, volunteering, giving through to nonprofits through payroll deduction, and really looking at robust ways to get their employees more involved in the work in the community. One thing we have seen from the millennials is an increase in appetite for just that. And so we're working with my colleague Alicia here, who focuses a lot on CSR work, is doing just that and trying to understand what the priorities are for those employers.
Do you find that you have more millennial volunteers than employees from other generations?
Absolutely. And they're volunteering in a different way. So we have groups like our emerging leaders that are focused on board development, getting more involved in the community, professional development opportunities, and also getting their hands a little more dirty than your traditional volunteer.
Just a question for Sean. Yeah, so, you know, the part that mentions 44% of San Diego millennials are considering leaving San Diego County in the next 2 years. Do you have, there was sort of a talk about the breakdown of reasons, and, you know, one of them is affordable housing, but there's other things such as higher pay and career advancement, and one of the things we hear a lot in San Diego, you mentioned in your report, is slower wage growth. Do you have to know the percentage of, you know, how many said higher pay, how many said career advancement, how many said state taxes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can get that to you. It should be in the report. If it's not, we can provide that to you. What I could say is that by far the lack of affordable housing options stood out. There was a clear divide between that and the next one. I believe it was over 2 times as highly cited as those other factors. But those are things like commute and traditional drivers of satisfaction.
And is there something that San Francisco's doing that we're not? Because they also have a housing issue up there, but it seems like millennials are not moving out of that area.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say that. I think that there are actually a lot of millennials that are leaving. They have an economy that is highly dependent on the tech industry. We also have a thriving tech industry, but I think with our military economy, it's a little bit more diversified. I would caution against comparing ourselves to San Francisco, but we are creating an economy that works for millennials, with the exception of the options for affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing, I mean there's a range of different products that we need in order to keep people here. We're not really talking about attracting millennials. Our goal is to create opportunities for millennials that are homegrown San Diegans. And that's really hard to do when prices are high. So what we end up seeing is a lot of people losing their kids that graduate college to an Austin, Texas, or a Portland, where they find an opportunity that works better for them.
And we talk about affordable housing all the time, whether it's low income, millennials, or whatever it might be. What's the solution? You know, where do we find this affordable housing?
Today we are releasing this report as a San Diego Regional Chamber Foundation report. So we're going to stop short of giving specific recommendations. Our recommendation is only to find a way to incentivize new housing. If you'd like to reach out to us tomorrow, we can get our advocacy team to connect with you, and we have lots of ideas about that.
And then one other question I kind of had, you mentioned the statistical significance of the 400 survey. Do you fear that might be a little low compared to the amount of millennials that are currently working or out there looking for jobs?
The standard is between 300 and 400, and what you do is you put together a sampling plan that ensures you have an accurate reflection of the economy. 400 is more than enough to ensure a 95% confidence interval, so it's statistically valid. Great. With that, we'll be available for one-on-one interviews. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Good job.